Good evening, everybody. We got another episode to do regarding the Gerald Shea Memorandum. And this is going to be part of the main section. It's section 4, the Israeli DEA Groups. So let's get right to it right away and not waste any more time because this is going to be about 9 pages. So we'll do, of course, a read along. As you can see, we'll blow this up just a little bit more. So this way you could see it as well and you can read along with me. I think that's going to be good enough. So here we are. All right. Israeli DEA groups. Virtually all of the scores of individuals questioned or detained by the DEA and other federal and local law enforcement authorities were citizens of the state of Israel. They were generally organized in groups of 8 to 10 people with a single team leader, the Israeli DEA groups. They usually worked individually or in pairs, carrying makeshift art portfolios. They visited scores of DA offices, laboratories, and houses or apartments, ostensibly to offer or show the paintings or prints in the portfolio for sale or promotion to DEA personnel. So you had about 250 of these people. You had about 8 to 10 people leading a group. Usually it was a woman and there were other guys. And I think with the woman, because it basically most of the people that worked in the DEA and the FBI were men. They would let their guard down a little bit when it came to a woman. Usually the woman was very young, pretty. And then what were they doing here, right? Why are they selling art? Well, from this point forward, it's speculation. So if they were doing signals intelligence, that means they were monitoring either phone calls, electronics. How would they do that? Well, there was one theory purported by Wayne Madsen, and it's a source I consider questionable. I don't know what to make of him really, but he wrote a good book called The Star and the Sword. It was basically all about the Saudis and Israeli intelligence pre 9/11. Anyway, he offered a theory, and I think it was him. Don't hold me to it. I think it was him that said that the art itself was bugged somehow. That there was radio waves somehow. I forgot how it was. I wish I could remember it. And that they would wait outside the houses of these people or businesses. And if they sold them art, they basically could hear something in the house when it comes to like phone calls or them talking in the house. I think there was like a listening device or something like that. I wish I could remember, but I can't. So you guys are going to have to do your due diligence about, whether that theory you can find online or something. I don't know. I thought it was very strange, but it wasn't too like ridiculous. But how would they, why would they sell them art to begin with? What was that about? So yeah, I'm not too sure. So I don't want to really lead you down to a dead end and, because everything I could say about this area could be wrong. Nevertheless, while Israel has compulsory military service, many of those questioned by U.S. authorities served in the military intelligence services or in electronic or communications units of the Israeli army. Now, the speculation theory that I proposed starts to make sense a little bit, right? So they're into, like I said before, they were into signals intelligence, right? So electronic or military intelligence service regarding electronic and communications. That means that they are basically people that will either listen to the phone calls, read emails, but how would they do this unless they hack into, a personal hard drive of a computer or putting listening device inside the art, and that somehow they could listen to the conversations of what's going on in the house or in the place of business of where these people worked. Something. Maybe they wanted to know where these people lived, and later on they broke into the house or, set up a listening device. That could be true too, because I don't know the specifics regarding how they operated, because this memorandum doesn't talk about that. It only talks about the people that were arrested. So your guess is as good as mine. Anyway, thus, for example, Leon Baram of Plantation near Hollywood, Florida, questioned by the DEA on January 22nd, 2001, had served 2 years in Israeli intelligence working with classified information. That doesn't fit a profile for an art student, does it? Dilka Borenstein, questioned by INS at Dallas-Fort Worth International on March 27, 2001, was a recently discharged military intelligence officer. Marina Glickman, questioned at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on or about May 1st, 2001, worked for an Israeli software company with expertise in handheld computer technology and had served as an Israeli military intelligence officer. Tomer Ben-Dur, also questioned at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on that day, worked for an Israeli wiretapping company and had served in an Israeli military unit that was responsible for Patriot missile defense. It seems that a lot of these art students had backgrounds with signals intelligence. Like I said in the prior video, where basically they questioned other military members of this Israeli art student ring, and they too had military service involving with communications, computer technology. So it goes to show you that either they were doing what I think they were doing, or they were doing something else relating to that. And whatever that is, I'm not thinking of it correctly. Maybe you could and leave a comment at the bottom. The DEA's Office of Security concluded that the Israelis may well be engaged in organized intelligence gathering. A spokesman for the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS, stated that dozens of these Israelis were expelled from the United States from California, the Midwest, Florida, and other states. No one has tallied the total, he said. The expulsions were usually for visa violations. Like I said, this is smart on their part. Same thing for the Saudis, okay? The first crime they committed was overstaying their visas. And the punishment is dealt with the INS, and that is through customs deportation. Whatever crime they committed, federal, and in this case, it could be, illegally wiretapping of a federal official. Well, the immigration takes precedence because that's the first crime they committed. The leaders of the Israeli DEA groups included Itay Simon, arrested on April 14, 2001 in Irving, Texas, recently discharged from the Israeli army, where he had done classified work for the Israeli military. You know, it's interesting, these backgrounds, but boy, you would think that, they wouldn't be, delving into this very menial job. A lot of these art students had, really important positions in the Israeli military. Incredible. Or intelligence, Israeli intelligence. Mr. Simon coordinated recruiting for the groups and served as an intermediary between 5 individuals in Israel and the U.S. operation. Another leader was Michael Kalmanovic, who rented a number of apartments in Irving, Texas, occupied by 25 Israelis. Mr. Kalmanovic was a recently discharged electronic intercept operator for the Israeli military. As stated in the DEA report, traveling about the United States to sell paintings seemed not to fit the background of many of these individuals in question. And that's right. I mean, it's incredible that, when you find out the backgrounds of these people, that the United States government had to have known what was going on at this point, because the FBI certainly did, and so did INS. And the DEA, who wrote the report, which is what these memorandum is basically based off from, basically said that this was the largest foreign intelligence service operation ever constructed on U.S. soil. Some ally. So what was the information they gleaned? Well, we won't know because the U.S. basically pardoned these people and said, just get out of the country, without basically investigating them further, saying, what were you doing? I'm sure there were people in the agencies that would like to have known what was collected, because this is before 9/11, and they were following who? Al-Qaeda subjects. But before the FBI or the DEA even noticed what was going on, these people were out of the country. A third principal was Hanan Sarfati, a team leader residing in Hollywood, Florida. When questioned by the DA in Tampa, Florida on March 1st, 2001, he had in his possession bank deposit slips amounting to $100,000 from December 2000 through the first quarter of 2001, and withdrawal slips for slightly less than that amount during this period. Mr. Sarfati served the Israeli military between the ages of 18 and 21, but refused to disclose to the DA his activities between the ages of 21 and 24, including his activities since his U.S. arrival at age 23 in the year 2000. Now, if we're to speculate, Hanan Sarfati basically was recruited by Israeli military and basically told about an operation he was going to partake. Now, did this operation pertain to knowledge about 9/11? Could be. Could this pertain to monitoring Israelis' enemies? Hamas, Hezbollah, Al Qaeda? Could be. Was it basically just a secret operation involving members of Al Qaeda without the knowledge of 9/11? Could be. But what else would it be? Because the evidence shows that these people were monitoring not Hamas or Hezbollah, but Al Qaeda. Maybe they're affiliates who could have been have links to Hamas or Hezbollah. But we don't know the specifics because all these people are deported and the Israelis are not talking. And because the United States is a strong ally, they don't have the necessary backbone to pressure the Israelis like they do with the Saudis regarding, hey, what did you collect when you were here in the year 2000, 2001? That's why I say, if we could pressure the Saudis, we could get to the Israelis. It's a pipe dream, but hey, what are we in this for? Another was Pierre Segalovitz of Tarmac, Florida, about 20 miles west of Hollywood, an active officer in the Israeli Special Forces Battalion who commanded 80 men in the Golan Heights. He was detained in Orlando on May 3rd, 2001. Tomer Ben-Dur, another Israeli of interest to the DEA, was an employee of NICE Systems, an Israeli company specializing in systems and solutions for detecting, locating, monitoring, evaluating, and analyzing voice communications and other transmissions from a variety of sources, activities commonly known as wiretapping and electronic eavesdropping. Now, is it so much outside the box to think that the art that was being sold was somehow a listening device is fitted somewhere in there? Because where are you going to put art? You're going to put it either in the bedroom or in the living room. You're not going to put it in the kitchen. Where are the phones usually? This is before the cell phone was popular, okay? People were still using rotary phones or electronic phones. In the living room and the bedroom. It's not going in the kitchen. Think about where art is going, like a big piece of art, like a big painting or a statue. It's going either in the living room or the bedroom, right? And that's where conversations are usually held. Sensitive information that you would tell your spouse or your girlfriend, whoever's living with you. Even intimate moments in the bedroom. So just imagine that if you're into wiretapping a certain person's phone, home, and that person is an employee of the FBI, INS, DEA, he might talk about what was going on at work. And especially if your work calls you at home, they're going to be talking about something that's private, not thinking anyone's listening besides these people. The question is, what did they collect? NICE Systems, U.S. subsidiary, is located in Rutherford, New Jersey, adjacent to East Rutherford, where 5 members of the Israeli New Jersey group were arrested on September 11th. When Mr. Ben-Dor was interrogated by the INS at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in May 2001, an inspection of his bags revealed a printout containing a reference to a file entitled DEA Groups. One member of the Israeli DEA Groups, Michael Gal, was arrested in Irving, Texas, was released on a $10,000 cash bond posted by Ophir Bayer, an employee of Amdocs, an Israeli telecommunications firm with operations inside the United States. The Amdocs employee described Mr. Gal as a relative. Of course, because they all look at each other as a brother, right? Amdocs is Israeli owned. They mainly deal with communications. Starting to make sense, isn't it? A connections between Nice Systems, which is a U.S. subsidiary to Amdocs, which is an electronics firm created in Israel, Unit 8200, which is a covert special signals intelligence unit within the Israeli Mossad, dealing with electronic communications, wiretapping, metadata collection, the sensitive data that is used by everyday people around the world. That's what makes Israel such a powerful country, one of the most powerful on the face of the earth. And Unit 8200, according to the NSA, claims that even though they're a small group, they're still on par with most of the intelligence organizations in the world, outside of the NSA and the GCHQ, which is the intelligence service of Britain. Those are the 2 largest in the world. Messengers Kalmovic and Simon were arrested by the INS for their role in the Israelis' art student selling activities without the necessary visas. That means if they were here on a student visa, they shouldn't be working. This is a violation of that. Or if they had work visas and it expired, well, then they are here on expired visas. They were held on $50,000 bond, which was subsequently posted through the DEA report. Does not say by whom, because the DEA is covering for them. Meanwhile, they're the ones being subjugated by an illegal operation. That's because the United States protects their interests. Israel and Saudi Arabia. 6 members of the Israeli DEA groups appeared to have been using cell telephones that were purchased by a former Israeli vice consul in the United States. So that means that they were calling each other remotely using a cell phone to keep in touch. During the first 5 months of 2001, and including a few calls in 2000, the Israeli DEA groups went to a total of about 57 DEA locations, 28 offices, and 29 residences, primarily in the southern U.S., ostensibly offering to sell or solicit an interest in paintings. That's what I'm talking about, paintings. These included 25 DEA offices and 3 laboratories. The DEA's Southwest Laboratory near San Diego and the residence of its director, the DEA's Southwest Laboratory in Miami and the residences of its chemists, and the DEA's South Central Laboratory or property adjacent to it, as well as the residences of one of its chemists and other employees. Now, let's speculate big time here, right? There's another ring. There's a drug ring, an Israeli drug ring. And if you don't know about the story of Jacob Cookie Organd, look into it, Google the name. Connections with famous and infamous Madam Heidi Fleiss, where he was involved with a drug ring, mainly an ecstasy ring, located in New York and the Southwest of the United States. It was the largest ecstasy ring in the world because Israel is one of the largest exporters of the drug ecstasy. And what does this have to do with anything that I'm talking about? Well, you'll notice that, like the CIA, they peddle in drugs. Why? Because with drugs, You're talking about black operations. You can't expect the Israeli Mossad or the Israeli Signals Intelligence Division to go before the Knesset and say, hey, listen, we need funding for this black operation that we're undertaking inside the United States. Because somehow these art student rings, they got to get paid too, right? Doesn't take much for the Israelis to get paid their art because, they may not be selling much, but they get a stipend. And that stipend comes from black operations, drugs, just like the CIA. So through the ecstasy ring, they could basically pay for the block operations that were happening with the art student ring and the moving companies. But the moving companies don't have to really be involved because they actually have employment. Not so much with the art student ring because they can only get paid through sales. And that's not assured. Okay. They very well could be. You get what I'm saying? I hope I'm not losing you. So and it's all speculation. So take this with a grain of salt. So you have a drug ring that could be paying somehow this operation as well as the moving front operation. I have no evidence for this. We're just speculating. Is it so out of the box? I don't like to speculate like the ridiculous theories. If it makes sense and I think so, I'd rather ask the audience. So this way I could get an outsider's perspective. Hey, that's too far out. Then I could change my way of thinking. But I don't think this is. One Israeli asked to visit the house of a DA employee to match the frame of his furnishing. Now, before I start again, this is the point I wanted to make, and I forgot to do it. So why are they monitoring DEA laboratories and the homes of the DEA? Because if we're to believe that the drug ring, the Israeli drug ring, was indeed being monitored by the DA or the FBI, this large-scale art student ring, which is monitoring the hijackers and the intelligence services, they basically could get a heads up about, hey, we're monitoring this drug group in New York and New Jersey and Florida, and they could be talking about it at home or at work. Whatever that painting, if it has a listening device, is on it, they could be listening to, and they could shut down the operation or part of the operation. They could go back and tell the drug ring, whoever's the spokesman for them, say, hey, listen, they're onto you. Shut it down, or whatever information they had, just be careful. That's why I wanted to mention that before, because what sense would it make for the art student ring to monitor DA laboratories unless they were investigating the drug rings in New York and the East Coast? It's the only thing that makes sense, right? Why else would they do it? Because how could that fit with the current program, which is basically this current, now that we know, because the records are out, this art student ring is monitoring Al Qaeda and the planes operators of 9/11. How could that fit with the DA laboratories? It wouldn't, unless anthrax is involved, and that very well could be true too. That also could be in here. Hey, speculation. Members of the Israeli DEA groups were also discovered taking photographs of a DEA office building and parking lot in Orlando, Florida, and on an active runway at the Volk Field Air National Guard Base at Camp Douglas, Wisconsin. An Air Force alert was issued from Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City concerning possible Israeli intelligence gathering at the base. Israeli personnel were also found taking a photograph of the house of a special agent of the Environmental Protection Agency in Denver, Colorado. Interesting. And diagramming the inside of an office building of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in Lexington, Kentucky. The Israeli DEA groups were clearly spying on the DEA and thus upon the United States. Many individuals in the DEA groups may have been trying to do more than sell paintings, albeit in violation of their visa status and thus unlawfully. But the total number of visits to DEA offices, laboratories, and residences precludes any characterization of these efforts as a commonplace sales endeavor. Correct. It's so out of ordinary that the only people that these people sold paintings to were members of the DEA, of the FBI, and also monitoring and taking pictures of military bases, laboratories, and the office of a FBI building. The DEA report speculates that the spying by the Israeli DEA groups was related to an ongoing ecstasy investigation. I knew it. In the course of an earlier ecstasy investigation, the DEA feared its communication systems had been compromised. Maybe someone in the DEA working both sides of the fence. Israel, United States, and that's how Israel got involved. Or that they just penetrated the DEA somehow. One of the difficulties in analyzing the DEA report is that it is reactive. And it explains the bulk of its records, the activities of the Israeli DEA groups when they call upon or attempt to infiltrate DEA offices, laboratories, or residences. The DEA did not generally seek them out, keep them under surveillance, or otherwise try to find out what they were doing other than making calls on and photographing or diagramming the facilities of the DEA and other governmental agencies. So in other words, the DEA basically didn't want to know what they were collecting. Why not? It's almost like, all right, we know that you're conducting operation against us, but we're not going to be reactive towards you, aggressive. When the DEA report was prepared, however, the DEA and the INS were, of course, unaware of the extensive activities and operations in the United States of the future September 11 hijackers and their suspected collaborators, whom the Israeli DEA groups appear to have had in their sights as well, because the DEA may be thinking that they're only conducting operations against us and our investigation into the ecstasy ring, not knowing that they were working also collecting intelligence on the planes operations. How else would the DEA know that? They wouldn't. Because what I think is true, that somehow the drug ring is connected to paying the art student ring and the moving companies, maybe the art student ring only. What else would it be paying for? What else is the link? I can't think of one. Can you? Why the Israeli DEA groups would be engaged in both activities, where they're spying on the DEA, would clearly raise suspicions among U.S. law enforcement authorities is unclear. Correct. They wouldn't know. But maybe they too could play in their heads, right? That maybe the funding of the drug enforcement of the drug ring was paying not just for the monitoring of the DEA groups, but also the Al Qaeda groups, the planes operators. We know the funding for the planes operators were coming from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Maybe it was coming from the drug ring. Hey, I don't think so. I think Saudis and the Pakistanis mainly dealt with the Arabic groups, and the Israelis mainly dealt with themselves. That's why I think they were acting on their own, and that the CIA, the NSA, the Saudis had no idea. Speculation, but I don't think they had any idea. I think the Israelis were monitoring the 9/11 operators all on their own. Then that would mean that somehow either somebody is a mole in the planes operators, or that they begun their investigation into the Hamburg cell or the West Coast cell, which is Khalid al-Mihdhar al-Hazmi, abroad. I don't know when that began. It may very well have been an effective distraction of others from or cover from their primary objective. That makes a lot of sense, right? If they're just basically saying, well, they're basically wiretapping DA. Is it a drug? Is it a drug investigation, right? Relating to the ecstasy ring, not knowing that that's just a cover for their primary objective, which is the planes operations, which is of course much more covert. Nobody wants to know about that, because if the planes operation is not successful, then the foreign policy plans of Israel and the United States and the coalition partners and Saudi Arabia are ruined. Because what happens? There's no invasion of Iraq. There's no invasion of Afghanistan, later Libya and Syria. Because why? 9/11 didn't happen. Did I lose anybody? Does this make sense? By the way, you ain't going to see this with Christopher Boland, right? A breakdown of this. Because he doesn't want an informed audience. I do. Because it's the only way we're going to get ahead. When we talk about real subjects and real things, not imaginary. I want you walking away from these videos knowing something. Israel's Institute for Intelligence and Special Tasks, commonly known as Mossad, is the Israeli agency responsible for its external security. A few days after September 11th, Israeli intelligence officials reported that two senior experts of Mossad had warned the United States in August of 2001 that large-scale terrorist attacks on the U.S. mainland were imminent. Guess what happened? Also in August of 2001, the CIA on August 26th reported to a principals meeting that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were inside the United States. And they withheld that information for 16 months. Richard Blee, the chief of station of the Bin Laden issue station, and George Tenet, the DCI, headed this principals meeting. Now, they weren't specific. Neither were the Israelis. The Israelis, on the other hand, gave them a list of names. Whose names were they? Allegedly, the names of the hijackers. How else would they know that? Duh, because they're running a covert operation in the United States, and they know exactly what was going to happen. Maybe that's why they celebrated on that rooftop. Mission accomplished. We're going to get it. We're going to get our goals. Our goals is the U.S. military to invade. Invade who? Iraq. They're going to defeat the enemies of Israel, which is the Arab community, the Islamic Ummah. When I say Israel, I'm talking about the government, not the people. Please do not be a racist. I'm pointing out the crimes of the government, not of the residents. They also informed U.S. officials of the existence of a cell of as many as 200 terrorists preparing the operation. 200. That is a far less number of what the FBI told us, which was 19. Now it makes sense about the additional hijackings that DJ Thermal Detonator and Paul Thompson and others have basically tried to tell you that were happening on September 13th and on September 11th. How come nobody else talked about that? It's amazing because how the freak does Israel know this, right? Unless they know about everybody. And that's really the reason why they needed that many people involved in that art student ring, as well as the moving companies. That's a lot of people. And just like with JFK, I'm pretty sure that the people who killed JFK, I'm talking about the people who really shot him, they're either dead or in the middle of some island somewhere. You ain't gonna, what? They're not in the country. The perpetrators are either dead or out of the country. That's how it is with big operations, especially 9/11. All the people that have basically real intelligence, I'm talking about signals intelligence, emails, phone calls, also human intelligence regarding the whereabouts and comeabouts of these Al Qaeda and associates. Who would know that? The NSA, the CIA, Israeli Mossad, the Saudi GID. What happened in the United States? The CIA and NSA were given a pass by 2 congressional inquiries. They also lied. The NSA was barely investigated. And the Israelis and Saudis deported immediately. Deported. We don't know we don't care. Just get out. That's what happened. And so the intimate details of 9/11, these people would have. But if you're talking about no planes, no hijackers, living hijackers and nuclear weapons and space beams, drones, CGI, holograms, guess what? All this information is not privy to you no longer. And now you don't have specifics, innuendos, because fringe theories that lead to nowhere. This is damning. Because with this, if everybody gets on the same page, now we could pressure the government, say, hey, who's Tomer Ben-Dor? Who's Hanan Sarfati? Who's Pierre Sogolovitz? Who's Michael Kalmanovic? Michael Gall? Who are these people? Because they were involved with a high-scale operation monitoring who? The 9/11 operators. That's who. But unless everybody in the truth movement, wakes up and says, oh, yeah, you know what? These planes were hijacked, Al Qaeda. And by the way, who is monitoring these people? Oh, wow, these people, we're not going to get anywhere. That's why I'm doing these videos, to bring attention to actual information of a conspiracy that really happened, not pretend. One highly placed investigator stated later that fall that there was evidence linking the Israeli DEA groups to the gathering of intelligence about the September 11 attacks. I mean, it's a no-brainer. What else would they be doing, right? Okay. He refused to disclose the evidence, however, since it was classified. Classified by who? The United States. Why would the United States classify information about a foreign intelligence ring that was monitoring them? Them. Why? Because the United States doesn't care about the victims' families, nor do they care about us. They care about their interests. First and foremost, fuck you, the average person. Go on believing Alex Jones and InfoWars. Go watch American Gladiators with the New York Yankees. Don't talk to me about this. A highly regarded American journal that broadly covers Israeli affairs reported in December of 2001 that the Israeli DEA groups were spying on Islamic networks in the United States linked to Middle East terrorism. Because if it was easy here, how easy it across the board. And if you have members of the mrmorandum, which is a very covert Israeli group that basically has people from the Israeli military undergo a 3 to 6 months training program where they learn the language of the Arabs or Farsi and live in the neighborhoods of Hamas, Hezbollah, Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, maybe infiltrating the training camps. Darker tan, they learn about the culture. And that's what the mrmorandum does. They assimilate into the neighborhoods in Palestine, the Palestinian neighborhoods of Gaza Strip and the West Bank, in the hopes of commiserating and gathering intelligence that way. And these operations could last anywhere between 6 months to 2 years. Living amongst them, Ziad Jarrah's cousin, Ali al-Jarrah, was a Mossad spy for Hezbollah for 25 years. He's not Israeli. He's Lebanese. But they recruit these people in the hopes of giving them money, intelligence or operational information, and they get in return money. Maybe if they live in a Gaza Strip, they'll go to this Palestinian family. Hey, you want chocolates? You want extra food and water? The basic necessities that other Palestinians may not have. You want to get to a checkpoint? Work with us. How hard would it be to infiltrate an Al Qaeda training camp in Al Farouk or Tanakh Farms? Especially if it's Egyptian intelligence or Pakistani intelligence, it's real easy. You think the Israelis can't do it? They can, according to U.S. Army. There's a journal, I think, written in 2001 that basically said that the U.S. Army were watching the training methods of the Mossad and that they were impressed at their veracity and their aggressive nature in learning the Arabic culture, because they can perpetrate terrorism in the name of a certain group and make it look like that certain group did it. Is that what happened on 9/11? They don't need to have all of the planes hijackers be Israeli. That doesn't even make sense. You could have either one or two people. That's all it takes. 19, all it takes. You know how easy it is to hijack a plane before 9/11? It was very easy. That's why they did it. They would have done it in 96 had Bajinka plot been successful, because that's where 9/11 came from. And Bajinka would have been bigger than 9/11, because you had 12 planes with bombs on them, all exploding over the Pacific, over the intercontinental U.S. and Southeast Asia, and you had a hidden compartment of where 10 planes were going to be hijacked. And imagine the devastation. It would have been crippling. So that's why this theory about additional hijackings on September 11th, 13th, it's no longer a theory, because TMZ, of all people, TMZ came out with a report that United Airlines Flight 23 was going to be hijacked. I covered that story. Nelson Martin's covered that story. Paul Thompson, Kevin Fenton, they covered it. Sean Russell, Darren Harvey, the kids at Podcast New American Century, they're covering it. Hardly anyone else is. I can't believe TMZ did. But it makes sense, because 9/11 had more than 19 people. There was no implication in these reports that the Israelis were involved in planning for or carrying out the September 11 attacks. I agree with that. I don't think the Israelis have the nerve to do something like that. Martyrdom operations is not their forte. That's for the Wahhabis. Their expertise are wiretapping of communications signals, communications operations. They're the best in the world, the best. Them, the United States, Great Britain, the best in the world. Rather, it was suspected that the Israelis gathered advanced information about the attacks and decided not to share it. Gerald Shea, if I could kiss you, I would. That's what I've always believed. That's what Michael Collins Piper also believed, and he was labeled an anti-Semite. That the 9/11 attacks was an Arab operation, but that the U.S. and Israelis got wind of the operation and manipulated it. That's what I've always believed. And when I heard Michael Collins Piper later on that he believed that too, I said, well, he's not nuts, because that's what I think, unless we're both nuts. But now it's starting to look that way. and it's not anti-Semitic to admit so. Is this report anti-Semitic? It's fact. What investigators are saying is that warning from Mossad was non-specific and general because just like the CIA when they held the principals meeting, yeah, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi are inside the United States. Now, did the CIA and NSA have specifics about 9/11? I don't know. The NSA may have known because they were listening to the phone calls of bin Laden's satellite phones for 6 years, and also the Al-Qaeda communications hub in Yemen for 5 years. Were they talking about operations then? Maybe. We don't know. We don't have the transcripts. But if anybody had specifics, I would assume with conviction, the NSA, Israeli Mossad, the Saudi GID, maybe the CIA. But the CIA only bugged the Yemen house, but they couldn't tap the phones. Those are the 4 agencies we got to be talking about at the forefront. I know people love Building 7, Building 1 and 2, and explosions, but there's no specifics here. What I mean by that is that we don't have names for the people planting bombs with thermite. They are part of 9/11, and I'm not dismissing it. It would not shock me at all if they came down by bombs or thermite or implosive device, because it ensures the buildings come down. And that's not more my area of study. I wish it was. It's part of 9/11, but it's one thing I have to admit I'm woefully inadequate on. However, with the geopolitics, we have specifics. Here's an example: the Gerald Shea memo. So we need to put this at the forefront because it never was. No one talks about the Yemen hub. Nobody talks about the NSA wiretapping bin Laden satellite phones. Nobody talks about the Gerald Shea memo. Paul Thompson did. Ray Nowinski, John Duffy did. Kevin Fenton did. None of these people are active anymore, except for maybe John Duffy. But they got other projects. Well, I'm going to try and live up to their legendary status. And I consider all 3 of those people legendary. They're the best in the world when it came to 9/11 study. Role models. The locus of the most important operations of the Israeli DEA Groups was the area in and around Hollywood, Florida. The majority of the incidents have occurred in the southern half of the continental U.S., with the most activity reported in the state of Florida. Hollywood seems to be a central point for these individuals, with several having addresses in the area. That means that they lived right nearby where the 9/11 hijackers are. You know damn well that they were collecting reports on them day after day in the year 2001. At the very time the DA was setting down these words in June of 2001, just 2 or 3 months before the September 11th hijackings, 15 of the 19 future hijackers were also living in Hollywood, 9 in the town itself, and 6 in surrounding towns of Hollywood for months. Had been and would continue to be the staging ground for the hijacking of the World Trade Center planes and the Pennsylvania plane. Among the Israeli groups, more than 30 lived in the Hollywood area, 10 in Hollywood itself. They were not only spying on the DEA, but in all likelihood were keeping the future hijackers under surveillance as well. This appears to be the tragic riddle the DEA, unaware of the future hijackers' existence, was unable to solve. Hanan Sarfati, stopped and questioned by the DA, as noted on March 1st, 2001, lived in Hollywood. Another leader, Legum Yochai, lived in Miami. One of the 5 members of the Israeli New Jersey group arrested on September 11th lived in Miami Beach. Lior Baram, the former Israeli intelligence officer, though stopped at the DA facility in Houston, Texas, may have been a DA group training ground as noted below, lived in Plantation, Florida, about 10 miles west of Hollywood. Pierre Segalovich, the Israeli Special Forces lieutenant, and his brother lived in Taramak, just north of Fort Lauderdale. Akiv Segev, a former bodyguard to the Israeli army's top-ranking general, appears to have lived in Hollywood or in Coral Springs. For the precise location of the relevant towns in the Hollywood area, see map 1. And that is the end of that section of the Gerald Shea memo. And that is the most important part of this memo, because it shows that you have a connection with the Israeli moving front companies, the Israeli art student ring, and what most likely could be an Israeli drug ring. To recap, speculation on my part coming up. The covert operation was the Israelis to monitor the planes operators inside the United States. They also used moving front companies to basically drive around the United States, specifically Florida, New Jersey, and New York, to easily coordinate efforts in monitoring those of the planes operators. The art student ring. The art student ring would basically collect signals intelligence, phone calls, emails, texts, whatever, regarding the DEA and the FBI and INS, but mainly the DEA. Why? Because they want to know whether the drug ring of the drug ring, the Israeli drug ring, was known to the DEA. Because what I think is happening is the Israeli drug ring was monitoring the black operations, the real operation, the hidden operation, which was the operators of Israeli intelligence and the military regarding the planes operation. So the monitoring of the DEA was basically a front, because the hidden operation was the planes operation. And you can't pay for illegal operations with federal money, because that means we can have a paper trail and we could blame them. With drug money, it's paper money, untraceable. Don't know where it originated. And you have no paper trail back to the government. That's what I think is happening here. That's speculation on my part. Let me hear from you in the comment section what you think. Maybe you have some ideas. I don't know. But that's the end of this video. And see you in the next one, where I read another chapter from the Gerald Shea memo. Good night, everybody.